Well, let me just slide into it here. God, what is this, 20 years later?
20 years.
How y'all doing? I'm Bill Hurd. Who are you?
I'm Dave Haynie,
Dave
last
Haynie.
I checked.
We're some of the original Commodore engineers. Actually, we're the original Animals.
The C128 Animals,
Yeah.
and previously the +4 or TED Animals, I guess.
Yeah. I always
We're
gave
just the Animals.
I always gave Dave the credit for coming up with the name. I had the long hair at the time, but he came up with, or at least the first T-shirt.
Yeah, I had a T-shirt from back in high school that said "The Animal" on it.
So yeah, then stories we could tell, but we're not going to tell stories. Too many stories here today. I think we wanted to just reach out to the attendees of this year's expo and say, how y'all doing? It's amazing that people still even remember the old Commodore computers. And this is actually a kind of a special year for me with this. It's the 20-year anniversary of the Commodore 128. At least I think it's the 20-year. We counted time different. We, not only was the time compressed, but it's like 84 was really when we did the work, but the product would come out the next year or starting January the next year. So I thought last year was the 20-year anniversary, but I think this year
it all pretty much worked by the time we were going into 85. But yeah, they started shipping. It's also the 20th anniversary of the Amiga, which, depending on how you look at it, was announced before the 128 was out, but actually didn't ship until after the 128 was out.
Right. So here it is, and of course we always the birth date of any computer was always the CES show in Las Vegas. So it's only fitting that you guys met in Vegas this year. Wish I could be with you. It's just things here in beautiful New Jersey didn't allow me to get away for that length of time.
Yeah.
But the good news is that because we've got some hardware here today that I would not have brought on an airplane, maybe you can actually see some things from the old Commodore days that you would not have seen had I actually just shown up and carried on for a few minutes with y'all. So,
yeah.
If I were to speak real briefly about what it is like 20 years later, I can tell you, I believe this would be true for Dave as well, that we, of course, weren't thinking about what will it be like 20 years after we're done with this. We weren't even thinking what would it be like a year later.
No, we were just trying to finish.
Yeah.
Get our whatever it is we were trying to do, trying to make it work and get it out the door.
Yep. And with time compression, we were living 20-hour days and sleeping in our offices and taking baths out of the sinks.
You mean that's changed?
Yeah, for me. I'm a kid now. I have to set a good example. We really only focused on the goal, and that was the CES show. And in fact, immediately after a CES show, we would be so wired that you would see people walking around Commodore in a daze, not knowing what to do with themselves. So we had to write them a list that included things like go home, take a shower, take a nap, because people didn't know what to do with themselves afterwards. So it was that kind of environment. It was a cool time. It was a cool time. I try and explain to people these days, and I'm not sure there is translation for it. It was a pioneering time. And I'm not saying we were the pioneers, but we were certainly standing right next to those that were. We were making stuff up as we went along.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all, you wanted something in there, and it hadn't been done 1,000 times
Hadn't been done before at all. Right?
Yep. So we would cook up one way to do it, and maybe somebody else would think of a better way to do it, or we'd look through all the old magazines like Creative Computing or Kilobyte or some of the try to figure out how the hobbyists did it or whatever. But it wasn't like today where it's been done so many times you pretty much can't change it.
Yeah. Well, I try to explain this to me. We used to put the signal onto a TV set. We used to put the Commodore 64 on a TV set. And they say, what, you'd set it on top of the TV set? It's like, no, there were no home monitors. What do you mean, you just couldn't afford them? No, there were no home monitors. It was that kind of environment back then that today everybody just assumes computerdom. I mean, there's two brands out there and whatnot. But we were fortunate to work in the shadow of some really great people and to have gotten to turn a few products ourselves over the years in spite of all the challenges or in addition to all the challenges. So, you have anything else to add, or you want to show them some hardware?
Yeah, I think it's time to show them some hardware.
All right. I was going to say, I want to start with, recently I saw somebody claim that the +4 possibly wasn't well engineered, and that's had Dave and I chuckling all morning. And so one of the things I kind of want to do is I want to show some of the progression. It's almost comical of the Plus 4 series. And we've got some prototypes that haven't seen the light of day, some wire wraps for you here. And then we've got a Commodore LCD machine, which I was told is myth. Did you know
I have heard that they don't exist.
Yeah.
There's another
a picture.
There's a few things here that actually don't exist, but we'll get to that.
All right, so let's change the camera around. Excuse us while we do this, and we'll maybe shoot right here. All right, cool. All right, I don't know how many of y'all remember one of these, but this was back when the Commodore 64 cost $299. Sinclair, later became Timex Sinclair, came out with this little guy, and this was a horrible, horrible machine, but it cost $49, and that sounded like a good deal, I think, to some people. And this is back when Jack Tramiel first worked there. When I walked in the door, I was hired to do some software to work for a guy named Benny Pruden. And I was supposed to be stuck writing code for hard drives or disk drives. Well, Benny was out my first week, so I wandered off to the hardware lab. And when he came back in that next week, they said, "You're going to have to hire another programmer because we just took this guy into the hardware group." What they showed me, a guy named Shiraz Shivshi pulled a color version of this called the Spectrum out of his drawer and showed it to me and said, "That's what we're doing." It had what we call chiclet keys. And I said, "Well, cool." Here's what the Plus 4, what they call the Plus 4, we call TED. This was the original target device. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually got fairly usable keys. It's a fairly nice size. But this thing was supposed to cost $49. And when your alternative was $299 or $399 or whatever the other computer costs, this was a low-cost entry. It was not supposed to step on our own toes when it came to building selling the Commodore 64. So
this was supposed to be a VIC-20 replacement and proof against somebody coming along and doing to Commodore what Commodore had done to everybody else.
Good point. So and nail down the Lawrence. So we actually probably didn't want compatibility. With that said, I'm not going to act like it hadn't been thought carefully through. I simply don't know. But this is what it was supposed to be like, and I will tell you that at $49, this is. Kind of, I don't know if you can see that. For the day, I mean, this thing's huge, but for back then, that was a small design. There was only like 11 chips in there, 9 chips in there. And I could tell you stories about how they came up with 9 or whatnot, but this was called, TED was text display, was the chip that was in there. And this is one of those designs that started from the chip design group. Bruce Aherns, Dave DiOrio, and Eric Yang was the designers on it. So in effect, they kind of designed the hardware a little bit because it's all based on this one chip right here. So, however, Jack Tramiel left that year. And I can tell you stories about flammable cases and everything that was left to us. But it started getting bigger. And I was still okay with that. I suppose making a better design sounded cool to everybody, but the management was getting involved. Horrible layers of middle management. Now, this is a 264 and this is a Plus 4. And I'll ask you, what's the difference between a 264 and a Plus 4? And I'll tell you that the answer is millions of dollars worth of lost sales opportunity. The 264 was supposed to sell for $79. In fact, it did when they sold it through Comb. It sold, they couldn't keep it in stock for $79. Yeah, I got a chip or got a DRAM. Remember sockets? We don't socket stuff anymore. So the Plus 4, of course, had this new label designed by somebody. Now people are starting to get involved. They're coming up with labels I never saw. Actually, at the end of the day, I would have signed off on it. But this had that really bad software. And cost $299. Now wait a minute. Now we're squarely in the Commodore 64's market, and it's only getting worse at this point. There was a 364, which I had a board of, and I do not have with me today. I cannot find it.
And I had a complete unit, which I sold to a Plus 4 enthusiast. So somebody might actually use it rather than leaving it in my basement. I didn't get a lot of time on it. So this one.
Now we've got people that don't even work in the engineering department designing computers. By the way, 364 talked. We had the guys from TI Speak and Spell, Dr. Richard Wiggins and Kenny Brightman. And they were amazing guys. It was really cool meeting them and getting to know them, going drinking with them. If you don't remember the TI Speak and Spell, it was revolutionary. Not only was it in the movies, but it was the first computer that talked. You could understand it. And we made a talking version of it called the 364 TI 364 Talking TED. We call it.
Yeah, Talking TED. It was the CV364. V for voice.
Voice. I didn't even remember that. That's right. It was. And the idea there was that you had this desk software that used voice. So it's kind of, they were at least tying it to an application. That made a little bit of sense. But then these things started to appear, and there was just tons of these. Oh, by the way, it was a 232. Somebody said that was rare.
The 232 was the 264 with 32K of RAM and no place to put a modem.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So, now what they're doing is somebody somewhere in Commodore is trying to save $1. Because that's about how much the DRAM would have cost between 64K and 232K. So there was like one of these things only said 232, and it appeared one day, and we all thought that was cool. I'm sure it was a lot of Japanese writing on that. By the way, you'll see on all my prototypes here, the thing that you won't see anywhere else from anybody else is these FCC labels. These prove that these were really the units that we had in our lab and what we were working with. I'm not even sure how I got these. So I think somebody sent them to me a year or two after I had left. Here's a C16. Somebody took our design, they redid it in a package, stuck it in a Vic case, I guess because they had it, figures a bunch laying around. And now Commodore is just truly wandering all over the place looking for how to sell a product that started as this, which was an answer to this. So, $49, $79. It was supposed to, I'll tell you that it could have made money or should have made money, but Commodore by this time couldn't get out of its own way.
But that does prove that Commodore was at one time a really big company.
Yeah. Jack Tramiel, we miss you, right? The
there you go.
here, hence came the C1 Commodore 128. I had written a memo saying, yes, Virginia, there is compatibility. Well, basically, I had to walk around the CES show one year and have everybody give me an earful of compatibility. And of course, I'm trying to explain that something costs $49, and they didn't care. All they knew is their educational software that they had written wouldn't run on Commodore's new machine. At first, they were scared, and we basically said, "Oh, do not worry, we will fail to sell it correctly, so you don't have to worry about your market share going away." So we came up with the idea of a computer being compatible with the Commodore 64, and I originally was on the Commodore LCD machine. I did the original design on 0.1 grid paper. Back in the old days, we didn't have computers that we did our designs in. They were just coming out.
In fact, we started doing computer design on the Commodore 128.
Yeah, we transitioned. We had to draw it twice, once on paper and once in the computer. Dave did all the drawing, by the way, he in the computer, I think. Didn't you? You did all the entry,
I
didn't
did
you?
I did all kinds of entry in there.
Dave also proved that DRAMs actually do work. They weren't called spreadsheets. It was called VisiCalc back then.
Well, it was actually a VAX spreadsheet.
But what was the name?
It wasn't VisiCalc. It was something weird. It was basically a bad copy of VisiCalc for the VAX.
Right.
And I did all the timing in there to prove that every
DRAMs actually worked.
The DRAM actually worked. In fact, there was a -1 margin on one timing parameter.
Yeah, the whole time. The whole time. Data whole time after the call.
Yeah.
Here's what, this was actually my prototype, and my proof here, because I looked at this and said, oh my gosh, who would do it? And then I saw my own sign to myself, says prototype only, so even back 20 years ago, I was justifying why somebody would have this number of jumpers and stuff on it. And this is what it took. I mean, we didn't wire wrap this whole board, but what this is, for example, is we needed 3 custom ICs. Well, we would plug a board in representing, let me get that in the show, into where the IC would eventually go. So we had different modules, all wire wrapped by our talented technicians, that would actually plug into a board. And we had 3 or 4 of these, and this is what the programmers would develop on going into CES, because we would get these chips during the 85 Vegas CES. They were actually bringing them out as each person arrived. They were bringing us 80-column chips. Each person would have 1 or 2 sometimes. And of those, even 1 might work.
And right before that CES, we spent pretty much between Christmas, well, actually including Christmas and New Year's, I think, testing chips to find the few out of the thousands that would actually work.
Yeah. Yeah. I had just gotten, so I was eating Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving dinner off the lab bench out of aluminum foil, and I couldn't think of a better place to be. It was just, and then this is what a 128 board ended up looking like. I thought it was signed. Yeah, it says R.I.P. Herd Fish Gway That's Paul Rubino's initials, I think, here. God, I thought it was written bigger in the silkscreen. I think they wrote it twice. But that just goes back to where middle management had actually tried to stop the development of the 128 right in the middle. And we made up the time by working 72 hours straight, and that's what that came from. Everybody that worked on it died that weekend, so it was RIP. So, yeah, show them what these things are so huge these days.
Well, yeah. This is what a C128 looks like after sitting around for 20 years.
The plastic. I have one that looks just like that too. My 128 I have at home. I actually bought at a yard sale. But this is soft tool plastic. That's why it's doing that. This was actually shot from a mold that wasn't limited.
Yeah, this is my own personal one. I had I had this hooked up to 4 floppy drives at one point. I was running CPM and regular stuff. I had it on an 80-column monitor. It was great. I mean, it was like the first real computer that I had worked on. So I was happy with it until the Amiga came out, at least.
We actually used to work on VT100 keyboards. And so our editors and everything. VT100's keyboard hooks to a VAX. Well, it's no mistake that this exact footprint layout is exactly what a VT100 at the time was. Yeah. We couldn't think of a better layout, and we were used to it ourselves.
And we really hated PC keyboards for years.
Yeah, even the Commodore key I was a little allergic to. But and of course, when we arrived at Las Vegas 20 years ago, we met with a fact that had escaped us as designers, which was that the C128 was expandable to 512. And it had been planned to be expandable to 512, but my boss at the time, who later got let go, told me that there was no time for me to put the MMU he had promised me I could put in it. And so we were limited to 128, and then his boss asked him, where does the memory expansion plug into? And he puffed on his cigar and said, in the back. So we had to come up with a device to plug in the back. Frank Pelea did this. This is a RAM cartridge. People like Hedley Davis got involved with. We did a spinning spinning globe demo, which was pulling images out of this with DMA under basic control. Yeah, that was very impressive.
You could actually do faster animation using this than you could without it.
Yeah, you couldn't draw something as fast as you could pull it out of memory. So here we came through. By hook or by crook, we came up with a mechanism and actually added DMA commands in BASIC. Who'd have thought it? Like I said, we were inventing this stuff as we went along. I just threw this in. This is designed by Jeff Porter, who went on to become the father of the LCD computer, and later, Jeff really rose up through the ranks and did a lot of good things.
Yeah, he was like one of the last.
He was the guy who knew how to tie a tie.
Yes, he could tie a tie, and he was also. When people talk about bad management at Commodore, he was the opposite. He was a great manager at Commodore. I worked for him on a number of projects.
Right. So what you saw back then is the thievery was starting in the later days. So there was a lot of things laying around with big orange H's made out of Scotch tape on them. That meant it belonged to me, and not George Robbins, who ended up.
George Robbins always wrote A500 modified on his stuff, and I usually wrote something like whatever it was, whatever I happened to be working on, prototype or special hack or something like that, which
scare people off,
just to scare people off from walking away with it.
All right, now this hasn't seen the light of day, I don't believe, in many years. This is one of the original Commodore LCD machines, and you'll actually notice the Scotch tape that's holding the bezel on here is 20-year-old Scotch tape. I'm afraid to take it off. To me, that just makes it more, proves its originalness, because we broke this the first week, I'm sure. And Ian Kirschman?
Yeah.
Ian was the guy on it. Yeah. Hedley Davis wrote the code. People like Judy Braddock, Andy Finkel, Carolyn Stepner were writing code on this.
And this had built-in software that was actually very good.
Right. Though I heard later that I wanted the memory management to point into memory and do everything, and they bought a bill of goods from the chip designers of the day who said, oh, you can't have the function line on there, breaks everything. Of course, they didn't know how to hit the chip designer in the back of the head in the parking lot and force them to do what you wanted them to do. So that was the disappointment.
There were a few issues, but this was the response to the Tandy 100. And
you know what else? Because I went because I was trying to remember the model was at 100 or 1000. But Commodore owned this is our own LCD glass.
We actually made it,
and we were the only company that the only company that made glass in America. All other glass came from, when we say glass, we mean LCD. Assembly, came from overseas. And we had bought a company called Eagle Pitcher, and we were making our own glass. And this actually lit up and it worked. This may actually work. I'm just not willing to power it up right now. But if somebody wants to buy this from me someday, I'll deliver it. Probably working with a full set of schematics. But I'm talking lots of money here, so don't. Send those addresses to, or send those dollars to.
This is certainly the rarest machine.
I think so.
Yeah,
and
at least one that worked.
Yeah, and matter of fact, the door here. Let me get it where you can see it. There's a door here where we can put an EEPROM in. Well, I've never seen it. I've seen this door. They used to get lost like right away, so I've only ever seen the LCDs in this mode. But if you see, I don't know how well you can see, these are real low-profile keys. That was a whole new design concept where the key from the top looks like it's got a lot of length and throw to it, but it doesn't. And that was done for us by Mitsumi.
It's an awful lot like modern laptop.
Yeah, for the day.
Yeah.
So we've got, there was even a, let's get, there's this, show you everything that's here. There's actually a barcode port on there. I mean, just to kind of show you what we were thinking about in the day. And because we can't have batteries work in the old days, there's the ever-present pair of pigtails where we would actually power it off of a power supply on the bench. So this is one of the, matter of fact, this had the number on it. This is number 2. So there was another one out there. I believe there might have been a total of 3 or 4. Jeff Porter really put his heart into selling. And this is concurrent to the 128. So Jeff and I were actually competing for resources in the good old Jack Tramiel fashion. But he had a good case that he could sell these, and he actually went to a CES and got orders for thousands of these things. And Marshall Smith, the president back then, said that, the way I heard it, and it could be wrong, that he had had a discussion with the president of Tandy and said there's no future in laptop computers.
Right, because who would want something that's portable and you could
all those
use on the run? And
of course, later that year we found out that it was their highest single-selling product of all Radio Shack was that old TRS, the green and gold thing. This looked a lot better than that, guys, I got to tell you.
Oh, yeah. This is a big improvement.
But Jeff had put his heart into it, so it wasn't for lack of trying that that this should have been produced. And this should have been. We should have been the first people out there. We should have been first to the PC market. We should have been first to the LCD market. But Commodore had lost its animal magnetism when it lost Jack Tramiel.
Yeah.
The Amiga Junior. I remember somebody said there was a memo that says the next person calls it the Amiga Junior is getting fired or something.
Oh, that was years later. With the A1000 Junior was what we dubbed a product that was basically designed poorly by management, and the guy who was in charge in those days had been part of the PC Junior project at IBM.
No, we're not going to drop any names because we're only. But speaking of names, let me tell you about some of the good names because you may have heard, like Dave and I, we've got a little bit of net presence out there. We're still a little bit of geeks. But the third member of the hardware team was Frank Palea. I'll tell you, most of us Commodore people from the engineering days still get together once a year. We haven't seen Frank in 20 years. Frank, if you're out there, give us a shout.
Really?
Be heard at jersey.net. Drop me an email. He's Haynie at jersey.net. Von Ertlein wrote CPM. Matter of fact, you may have seen my writing where Von produced a small miracle by editing CPM during the CES show with the disk editor, getting the checksums right and everything, and making the 80-column chip work in spite of itself.
Yeah.
Hedley Davis, who's an old friend of mine, came from the same company that myself and Terry Fisher, who did the PC boards. We all came from the same company, and Hedley had a real good background in hardware and software and math, and so he produced the Spinning Globe we talked about.
And he was doing both hardware and software his whole time at Commodore. He was a real inventive guy.
Did the Commodore mouse?
He did Hedley Hi-Res, which some of you Amiga people may remember.
As opposed to Higgy Charlie, a name I couldn't say. Of course, Greg Berlin, the man that broke my shoulder, 6'8". He was the only guy I'd fight because I'd hurt anybody else. And,
he broke my front teeth.
Okay. And he designs like he fights. I'm not going to tell. And Dave Siracusa, who wrote the code, a devoted family guy. After all these years, that's why I still hear about him.
Fred Bowen and Terry Ryan on system software. Those guys could pretty much eliminate any mistakes that we made in the systems or the chip people made. And keep in mind, in those days, it was all in assembly language.
And Ed Parks, our boss, who in later days was my boss, who proved that management actually could do something useful as far as furthering the design. The chip guys, in both the Plus 4 and the 128, a guy's named Dave DiOrio, who was my best friend at one time. We broke the barrier between the chip guys and the hardware guys and the programmers. Prior to that, there had been finger pointing. Well, of course there's finger pointing. As the design gets near the end, the accumulation of errors is such that people would say, well, you made a mistake. Of course we made a mistake. We're going fast.
Part of engineering, yeah.
Right, and we're going at light speed. Yeah. So we started, Dave and my friendship started where we just knew that would occur. We called the programmers and said, look, you're going to fix the problems. At the end of the day, you're fixing all of our dirty laundry. Get used to it now. We'll buy you a beer and get back to work now. Yep. And that worked for us. So Dave and I kind of broke the molds with that, and then we started actually working with the Commodore Japan engineers to the point where I actually learned Japanese, so I could drink with them and talk bad about the boss right in front of the boss, and that was always a lot of fun. And so we broke down those barriers too.
Yeah, and that pretty much was retained when we started doing Amiga stuff too. We the hardware, the software, the chip designers, we all pretty much got along. It was very weird because I had worked at other companies where they built official walls between hardware and software, which just encouraged the finger pointing.
Right. So how do you? Let's wide angle this.
That's as wide as we can get without the adapter.
Okay, and go ahead and scroll it up. So that they're not just seeing. Yeah. See a table full of everything
full
here.
Of junk here. You can pull it back a little. You can always edit this out. Okay. Transition. That's not too bad. But get us in here.
Yeah, I don't think we're.
There we go. Look, we're still here.
Yeah, we thought we'd so you don't just see a table. Here's see some hands while we're talking. So the some of the other people that you wouldn't have heard about, the technicians, Gail Moyer ran the hardware lab. Kim Constantine Gray, who in addition to being a special person, was probably the one technician most responsible for the Commodore 128 getting completed. She would actually stay at Commodore during the long nights, and I would finish engineering about 2 or 3 in the morning, and she would get up from bed and she would do the changes I needed to finish something that night, and by 5 or 6 the next morning we'd have it working. You remember those days?
Yeah.
We would fix it every night. There wasn't a problem that went more than
every
24
problem
hours.
was done in a day.
Right. And consequently, you see me walk around barefoot at 8 in the morning looking grumpy, wondering why all these managers are now walking the halls in my territory.
Yeah. And we get sleeping bags under the bed, under our
air
desks.
mattresses. Yeah. And we would actually go to sleep and let the daytime crowd kind of pass us by, while we caught our naps there. Jeff Brennicky, Kurt Guthrie. Kurt, don't call me lab trash Guthrie. Lucky Kowalski. These are all the technicians. In the IC layout group, we had Mike Angelina, who's no longer with us.
Right.
Jim Rollhauser is no longer with us. Jim, the Reverend Jim, quite a character. If you ever get a chance, he's got some Nash the Slash videos are still out there. Buy one. It's wonderful stuff for 20 years ago.
Really cool stuff. He was a pioneer in video. I mean, he was doing rock concerts and doing computer video before pretty much anybody was.
And he proved you could disrupt an entire workplace just by bringing a video camera to work. Nothing got done for a day. He would. Dave Esposito, Sandy Rashong Fisher, again, special people that we used to hand lay out these ICs. When we got there, it was still ruby lithe cutters in the drawers. I never saw them doing that. But they would actually cut films by hand by pushing desks together and cutting them with razor blades. And when we got there, they were drawing polygons on screens, but they didn't have the design tools that said whether they did it right or wrong. So people like Dave DiOrio and Victor Andretti, they would spend months with a scale measuring these huge plots, and that's how you checked your work. So it didn't matter how clever of a designer you were; it mattered how well you checked your work. And that would have driven me nuts because I don't check my work that well.
No way.
So it's
better to have a tool that checks your work, which we have these days.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have to tell you, some of the work, like you see Jerry Ellsworth, putting an entire one of these on a chip. And doing it from a PC computer, I mean, it's just a wonderful thing these days. You can literally, a person in 3 weeks can do what it used to take 5 or 6 of us, six months or 6 months or more to do. So it's really changed the environment. You put this on a single chip these days, but pull out that Amiga board. That thing's a
Yeah, this is a blank.
Look at the size. Not only could you eat dinner off, 2 people could eat dinner off this, and this is the size of stuff that you wouldn't dream of doing that. This is one 1/100th of what's in a cell phone these days.
Here's my latest board by comparison.
So, well, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, you all haven't fallen asleep, or you've been able to hear us throughout this. But we couldn't be with you today, but we did want to say, thank you for remembering the Commodore days. I don't know, thank you, or it's amazing that you
remember the Commodore days.
When I talk to people these days, 10 years ago, I'd say something about Commodore, and I could get a rise out of the person if I said, "Remember Commodore 64?" So they go, "Oh yeah, my dad." Well, nowadays there's a whole generation of people that never even heard of Commodore. My wife thinks Commodore was like the 5 people I go to see every summer, and we must have sold a couple dozen computers between all of us. She doesn't realize that, like so many of the generation, she doesn't realize just what Commodore was in the workplace, or in the computer environment, and to the victors goes the spoils. Apple's still here, so we all know those names, but you don't know those names of all the people that were putting this out there, from the Jack Tramiel era. So it's really cool. Anything to add?
I have a few of the last things that were done at Commodore here.
Yeah, let's see those real quick.
Just real quick. Okay, here is a CD32.
I've never seen one of these.
Yeah, this is a CD32 motherboard. The CD32, of course, was the game machine. And this was, I guess, the last major product that Commodore released. This was a year in which they were really hemorrhaging money, and it was kind of like, if enough of these they were able to make, maybe they would have lasted a little bit longer, but they were just out of money. And the last big thing I worked on, which is another thing that you read places never existed. This was a AAA motherboard, or what we called a AAA motherboard. This was the Advanced Amiga architecture, the 64-bit chipset, and of course there's no chips on here because we built 3 boards, but we only had enough chips for 2 of them because they were actually doing edits on the chips at that point.
And look at the size of those things.
That's huge, of course. Even regular PCs have shrunk compared to this. This one had a network. It had a bunch of stuff on it. It was really cool. It had the operating system on a ROM, so you could change it on a cartridge.
I just have to show this. This is a Cam 1. This is what started it all for you. It's a processor and some memory.
We even have the manual for it around here somewhere.
So, all right. Well, again, it's been a pleasure, talking to you. Hopefully, we may get a chance to do this again sometime, or run into you guys down the road. Supposedly there's a book coming out. You know about that?
I know about the book. I actually contributed a couple interviews and some photos to that book. I don't know if they made it in or not, but
so be looking for that. And my email address, if anybody's ever interested, is I have the C128.com domain. That sounds a little pretentious, so I give out bherd, BHERD at jersey.net. And if you put Commodore in the subject line, it'll make it through my spam filter.
Yeah,
so
and same thing with D. Haynie at jersey.net, and that's spelled Haynie,
right?
Not the way they did on Green Acres.
Oh, see, I told somebody else. And the jersey.net domain, I own an ISP, so the domain name's free, so that's why those instead of a nice Commodore name. So again, it's been a pleasure, and we hope to run into you in the future.
Bye.
So hopefully that recorded, right?
Yep, that recorded.